chats with his mother about building his own business and gives him a call to discuss the possibility of purchasing a home together. When Karl meets Agian, he declines his offer to become a partner, stating, "Chloe is me." Rather, she promises him a saucepan-free venue for the next show along with a tiny compensation increase. Karl exits after being discouraged by the result. When Karl and Jacques go to the English villa, Jacques asks Karl to stay the night. But Karl disappears in the middle. He departs early the following day for Paris to meet with Biderman, who shows him an abandoned factory and, citing the oil crisis, wants to start with sportswear rather than Karl's idea in America. Karl returns discouraged and frustrated. Karl also shows up as Yves extends an invitation to Jacques for his party in the meanwhile. Unable to let go of Jacques, Yves makes a scene at the party and tries to buy him from Karl, but Jacques is quickly hauled away. Later, should Jacques decide on Karl, Karl instructs him to pick between Yves and him. The following day, Karl approaches Agian and Lenore about going into the perfume business because Biderman is no longer an option. He suggests starting a different perfume firm, with Karl keeping half of the profits and the other two splitting the other half. Remaining with Chloe is his decision. Jacques greets him as he arrives and says, "I've always chosen you." After going out to supper, the two discover that Yves has vanished. When Yves came to see him, Jacques admits, things got violent. Karl discloses that Yves attempted self-harm in the past and has a history of clinical insanity. "What have you done?" Karl asks him as the show comes to a close. The review of the episode. There was only melodrama in this episode. Watching a designer as renowned as Yves Saint Laurent, who is still associated with high fashion, turn out the way he did is actually very depressing. The program does a great job of capturing the huge pressure that comes with being a creative, where opulence and stardom take away more than they provide. It's interesting to note that, despite the program being based on actual events and people, Yves' character has evolved into something of an antagonist and a story device. Furthermore, the dynamic between Karl and Jacques has improved as well, growing more solid and mature. This episode accurately portrays Lagerfeld's personal and professional problems, despite the fact that it takes place during the period when he was attempting to build his own brand and independence. On a different subject, watching a dramatized portrayal of the competitions between the biggest names in the fashion world is really thrilling. Episode 3 of Becoming, in bed with Karl before Laurent and Jacques are arrested for indecency, Karl Lagerfeld opens with them having an affair. The cops send Karl and Pierre to pick them up. When Jacques has an affair with Laurent, Karl kicks him out of the car during their quarrel on the way home, indicating tensions in their relationship. Over the course of the following few days, Karl requests to hire a sizable room for Chloe's upcoming show, but Chloe and Lenore, the company's partners, protest. Karl later meets with Biderman, a French manufacturer famous for clothing companies, as a negotiating strategy. They are situated directly across the street from one another, so Agian can conveniently view them together from her apartment. Karl says he wants to be a partner in the company or keep his options open during a conversation with Agian and Lenore. He also laments the lack of autonomy he has over business decisions. Concurrently, Jacques and Yves go out to clubs, but Jacques comes away disappointed. Karl gives him a call the following day to chat about the possibility of purchasing a home together and has a conversation with his mother about building his own brand. During their meeting, Karl approaches Agian, who declines his offer of a partnership, stating, "Chloe is me." Rather, she proposes to him a little pay increase as well as the venue free of saucepans for the next show. Disappointed with the result, Karl walks away. When Karl and Jacques get to the English villa, Karl wants to stay the night with Jacques. But in the midst, Karl departs. He takes an early flight to Paris the following day to meet with Biderman, who shows him an abandoned factory and suggests starting with sportswear rather than Karl's original plan for America due to the oil crisis. Karl departs once more discouraged and frustrated. Karl also joins the party that Yves invites Jacques to while this is going on. Unable to split from Jacques during the party, Eve makes a commotion and tries to buy him from Karl, only to have Jacques whisked away from him right away. If Jacques decides on Karl, Karl later tells him to pick between Eve and him. Karl makes a pitch to Agian and Lenore the following day about getting into the perfume industry because Biderman is no longer an option. Karl would receive half of the profits from the new company he suggests, and the other two would split the remaining half. He chooses to remain with Chloe. "I've always chosen you," Jacques tells him when he finds him waiting. When the two go out to supper, they discover that Eve is missing. When Eve visited Jacques, Jacques admits that things got violent. Karl discloses that Eve has attempted self-harm in the past and has been mentally ill. Karl asks him, "What have you done?" as the episode comes to a close. The episode analysis. It was a melodramatic episode. Yves Saint Laurent, a highly esteemed designer who continues to be associated with opulent style, is truly rather heartbreaking to see how he ended up. Being a creative comes with a lot of strain, which the show really illustrates by showing how opulence and celebrity actually take away more than they provide. Surprisingly, despite the fact that the program is based on actual events and people, Yves' character has developed into a strong antagonist and a plot device. In addition, Karl and Jacques' relationship has improved, growing more solid and mature. This episode, which takes place during the time when Lagerfeld was attempting to forge his own identity and independence, isn't without its difficulties, and it does a good job of capturing his frustrations, both personally and professionally. Conversely, it's really thrilling to watch a dramatized portrayal of the battles between the biggest names in the fashion world. Becoming, Episode 3, in bed with Karl after having an affair and getting arrested for indecency, Karl Lagerfeld opens with Jacques and Laurent. The police come to pick them up and call Karl and Pierre. As a result of Jacques' affair with Laurent, tensions in their relationship explode during a road trip, with Karl shoving Jacques from the car. Karl wants to hire a big venue for Chloe's upcoming concert in a few days, but Chloe and Lenore, the company's partners, say nay. Later, Karl meets French industrialist Biderman, well known for his apparel companies, as a bargaining chip. Luckily, Agian can see the two of them sitting directly across the street from her apartment. Karl conveys his frustration with the lack of autonomy in business decisions to Agian and Lenore. He also states that he would like to become a partner in the company, but he will not rule anything out. While all is going on, Jacques and Eve attend clubs, but Jacques comes away disappointed. Karl talks to his mother about building his own business the following day and gives him a call to discuss the possibility of purchasing a home together. Agian declines Karl's offer to become a partner, stating, "Chloe is me," at their meeting. She proposes to provide him a saucepan-free venue for the next show in exchange for a tiny wage increase. Dejected at this result, Karl walks away. Jacques wants to spend the night with Karl when they visit the English villa. But in the middle, Karl disappears. He takes off early the following day for Paris to meet with Biderman, who shows him an abandoned factory and, citing the oil crisis, wants to start with sportswear rather than Karl's idea in America. Again, Karl walks away discouraged and frustrated. Karl also attends, and in the meantime, Eve invites Jacques to his party. Unable to split from Jacques, Eve makes a disturbance at the party and tries to buy him from Karl, only to have Jacques taken away right immediately. Karl then instructs Jacques, should he select Karl, to pick between Eve and him. Karl makes an offer to Agian and Lenore the following day to enter the perfume industry as Biderman is no longer a possibility. Karl will keep half of the profits from the proposed separate perfume company, while the other two will split the remaining 50%. Resolving to remain with Chloe. "I've always chosen you," declares Jacques, who is waiting for him. Eve disappears from their dinner date, which is when the two go. Confessionally, Jacques says Eve got violent when she visited him. According to Karl, Eve has a history of self-harm attempts and has been diagnosed as psychologically insane. As the show comes to a close, Karl asks him, "What have you done?" Review of the episode. Melodrama personified in this episode. As a respected designer who is still associated with high fashion, it's truly very depressing to see how Yves Saint Laurent ended up. Being famous and opulent take away more than they give when it comes to the pressures of being a creative, which the show realistically highlights. Oddly enough, despite the fact that the program is based on true events and people, Yves' character has evolved into something of an antagonist and a plot device. Also improving and becoming more solid and mature is the relationship between Karl and Jacques. This episode chronicles Lagerfeld's difficulties, both personal and professional, and even while it comes from the period in which he was attempting to forge his own identity and independence, it is not without its challenges. A dramatized portrayal of the battles amongst the biggest names in the fashion world, however, is extremely entertaining.